Hi, this is Mary Rubino, and the show is Naturally Speaking, where we introduce holistic practitioners to everyone in the area, things that are offered, and just kind of raise a little bit more awareness of that. This is episode 8, and last week we had Nick Julian and Mark Mazzucchelli here talking about their chiropractic practice in Franklin. Today, we're lucky enough to have Mitzi Bramble here, and Mitzi kind of does everything. She started out as a counselor at a school system, and she's an expressive arts therapist now over at Living Buddha Nature in Millis, Massachusetts. So Mitzi, glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Please tell us how you came to this. I looked at your bio, and I've never seen anyone with such an enormous repertoire of things that you do.
Well, as an expressive arts therapist, my process was a real spiral journey, which I am very into the whole journey, and I believe that people come into things sort of naturally and just to let themselves go where they need to go. But I was always really creative as a young person, very playful with photography, with art, and I played with my friends. I used to do a lot of photography with my friends. And then I became a professional photographer in Boston.
Nice.
And actually, although it was a very glamorous sounding job, I really started to dislike it because my creativity was stifled.
Yeah.
And you know, I did headshots and model portfolios, which sounds really great, but it was not my creativity. So I decided to leave photography, sell all my equipment, and go back to school at Lesley University for expressive arts therapy. Of course, everybody was freaking out. They're like, "What? You're actually you're leaving this job?" And I just was like, I knew I had to do this. I knew I had to do it. I needed to be more creative. And what I found in my photography business was that I started to realize that I enjoyed the actual shoot more than I enjoyed all the rest of it. I really enjoyed making people feel comfortable during the session, and I realized that. So I went back to expressive arts therapy and sort of had no idea what I was going to do with it, but I sort of, in my last year of my education, my master's degree, I came across a job at a high school in Bellingham, the alternative school in Bellingham.
Okay.
And actually it was an internship towards the part of my master's degree. And then they ended up hiring me. And they hired me as an expressive arts therapist.
That's excellent.
So I had it was an incredible job. You know, I had a whole art room and we did all kinds of stuff. And I worked with kids who had, you know, social emotional needs. And that was an incredible job. But I did leave after a while, and as changes occurred in that school system, and then I ended up as an adjustment counselor at Foxborough High School for another 10 years.
Okay, wow. So you might be a familiar face to a lot of kids that have come through the school system, 20 years as a counselor.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and you also, and being a photographer as well, that's a nice, you know, kind of a leap. Now, let me ask you this question, because I love this question. So when people go from photographer to expressive arts therapist, did you feel a little cosmically pushed? I mean, did you recognize where you were going, or did it just kind of feel like a good move to make?
It was something that I just knew I had to do. It did feel like a leap, and a lot of people were like, how on earth are you going to get a job as an expressive arts therapist? But when I just followed my heart, I landed a job like before I was even finished with my master's, and I stayed there for 10 years. And it was incredibly rewarding, and I absolutely loved working with high school kids. Did it for another 10 years at a school system.
That's excellent. So now you do expressive arts therapy at Living Buddha Nature, and I'm going to touch on a couple of other things that I noticed that you do. You also teach meditation. And people can come for like cognitive therapy and talk with you about their life's path, and I'm sure that you have a lot of insight for that as well, about how that would be helpful for people. But I mean, I'm looking at these, and we got to touch on this. You do soul collages.
Yes.
Now, a soul collage because your mind thinks in pictures, guys. Everyone keep that in mind. Okay. Your mind thinks in pictures, so that's got to be a very powerful way to bring people out of their shell and help them be able to feel safe in talking about what's going on for them.
The one thing about soul collage, which I love as an expressive arts form, is that it's a really structured process, so it's easy. And I call this one of my no-fail arts. So people can come in and they can make art and not feel like they have to make it pretty or perfect. But this particular style of working, no matter what you do, it just looks good. So people leave going like, wow. So for example, this is a card that I made, and it is basically, I just sort of played with some of the images. There's a background image, and I threw some butterflies on there, and I did it very intuitively. You have people just not really worry about what they're going to choose. You just say, pick whatever, create a background. There's these cards that are perfect size, so that makes it easy, less choice. Create a background, pick an image that's interesting, and then just play with other images. And then put it in and not think about it. And then once they have the card, we put it into this cellophane thing. I don't know if it's like kind of
It's like a
glaring.
cellophane envelope, yeah.
A cellophane envelope, and so almost no matter what you make, you go like, wow, that looks really great. So it sort of feels like you have, you've made something really cool, even though there's really no, you don't have to try that hard to do it.
So at any point, do you ask people, well, okay, I have an elephant here and somebody on top of it. What's that mean? Does it, you have to like figure out what it means for you, or is it just following what you're attracted to?
Well, you do follow what you're attracted to, but what happens is in each card, we look at it as messengers. So once you've created the card, even though you may not know why you've picked certain images, you may start, what we do is we start to look at it and we ask it questions, which sounds a little weird. Yeah.
No,
so
woo-woo is fine here. Okay, just let me get that out of the way. Woo is fine. A lot of people go, whoa, woo, I don't know about that, but keep your mind open and be receptive to things, because holistic practitioners have all different ways to bring you to yourself, and it's not unusual to have something like what you're saying, where you're kind of asking a question and you're being open to what comes to your mind.
Right, and one of the things, and I do this a lot with a lot of different other modalities. We work on even emotions as messengers. What are they trying to say?
Exactly.
Let's go into that emotion and find why it's actually valuable and how it serves you.
Exactly.
So everything is welcome. Everything is safe. Safety is critical in the therapeutic process. So since you brought this card up,
I like that one.
I do like this card too, but it's interesting because I played a lot with it. But there's just my background were these trees. I found an elephant, and then I found a different picture with a body, and I threw another little head on it.
Oh, you put a different head on that?
So
so
it almost like looks. Once you put it in the cellophane, it looks kind of like finished. But then what happens is then I have people ask the card, who are you? And
I want to know this one because I'm a little curious myself.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, it's different for me than it is for you.
Right.
So actually, when I could give you my cards and say, you could ask the card and say, who are you? And you would have a completely different answer.
Okay.
Now, if I ask the card, I still might not have known why I made the card. But when I ask it, then the answer you do, this is from Soul Collage by Sina Frost.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with this book, yep.
Yep, and you answer from the card as a messenger, and from the card you say, I am the one who.
Okay.
So the card answers, and this might be, this particular one with the trees and the elephant could be, I am the one who likes to play in the forest. I am the one who needs to be alone sometimes. I am the one who likes animals. I am the one, and it might bring up an emotional quality, or it might not. But but the thing is that it comes from the card. And the beauty of this in terms of working with other people, and especially when they need to have some
Safety, right?
some safety, this gives them a little bit of distance from their own stuff. So they're going, this card is giving me a messenger from what I'm thinking of, but I didn't know I was thinking that.
Okay.
So, so then after you do that, like sometimes we'll write it all down and it comes out very poetic. And then you say, you know, do you have any suggestions for me? Sometimes, I forgot to say this, sometimes you actually ask it a specific question. So they can act a little bit like an oracle card.
I'm not familiar with oracle cards, but I am very familiar with this type of work in hypnotherapy, because when people are in hypnosis, you can ask them, well, what part of you wants to hold on to emotional eating, or what part of you feels like you're threatened all the time, or what part of you is afraid to move forward? And that's, again, the same kind of idea where you're doing it in a safe way so that you're kind of separating it from yourself, like what part of you. And so this makes a lot of sense to me.
Right, and
Yeah.
absolutely the whole concept of messengers are working with parts. And I do work with parts in a lot of different modalities that I do.
Yeah.
Like how do you sort of take that step back and realize that we're not all one part. We're not all fear. You know, we're not all victim. Those are just parts of ourselves that may need expression.
And on a subconscious level too, you may have things that happen to you that you're not typically owning because you're not really aware of it. So this would also bring it out in a very safe way for people to express themselves but not feel on the spot.
Right,
Because it's just a part of them, it's not them. So you can kind of push it away just a little bit to look at it.
Right.
And then the same thing you're saying with emotional states, you know, your emotions are always there to tell you something. If you have your senses, your outer senses, you have your touch and your taste, right? And you have your hearing. Those are awesome, but also your emotions are the other very important senses. Those are telling you something all the time as well.
Absolutely.
So you can always go by your emotional state. I feel
Absolutely.
angry. What the heck's going on? What are you thinking that's creating that? So
Same
thing, very important work.
Right.
And I think that people probably feel a lot safer creating things that are in their mind this way, as opposed to saying, I don't feel well in my mind or in my body because this thing happened, or because I'm afraid that this will happen. And so it must create a lot of safety for people.
Absolutely.
And by the way, I am going to come and see her and do one of these because I think it's an amazing process. Very good. So now people can go down to Living Buddha Nature and see you and learn about this as well, right?
Yes.
And you're a therapist, so these things are covered by you, by insurance for people.
Yep.
Right. Okay. And what happens if someone creates it, but maybe they're not in touch with themselves enough to know what it means for them?
Well, actually, you know, I always stay wherever the client is. If they don't feel like they're not getting anything from it, then we work on, you know, the idea that they're not getting anything from it. So we just go right to the source, and that keeps it just safe. You don't have to get anything from it. It doesn't matter. And even if it's like, even here, I just sort of, you know, came up, I could have gone much deeper, but, you know, I you know, want to be alone. I like elephants. You know, I'm so far, you know, I'm not going deep there. But the card starts to like, can ask you, I mean, it can tell you some things. And you can also, the last question is there anything else you want me to know? So it could be very, you know, light, or it could go really deep. And people are usually surprised. Sometimes, you know, they just love what came out of the card. Like they just are like, oh my God, that is like, that's so me. I mean, or that's exactly how I feel. And, you know, other times we're just working with a simple process, and the process of creating itself is incredibly healing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's true. And I mean, we all have different parts of ourselves. There's, you know, you may like sports, you may like fishing, but you may like to do something completely different. So, I mean, it kind of puts you in touch with all those different parts of yourself that you may not be recognizing or that you may not be honoring, correct?
Absolutely.
Right. So there's parts of you that have a certain feeling, have a certain need to express, and this is an excellent way to do that.
Right, right, yeah.
Yeah.
And basically in my therapeutic practice, whether or not I'm using art therapy or expressive therapy, I'm always honoring where the person is and where they need to go, and keeping it really, really safe by just being with what is there and allowing it to unfold naturally.
Right. So there's no projection on your part. Oh, wait a minute, this is what you like and this is what it's about. No, you don't do that at all. You let people come into their own. I'm just going to hold up a couple of these because people can't really see them. Got a little girl here and all the colors around her.
Yeah.
That's very nice. And then, well, this one looks like my mom's dog. I'm just noticing that. Yeah.
That's actually my dog.
Is it really? Wow. And, okay. I don't know what I'd get out of this one, but it's kind of cool to look at.
Well, and it's like you don't have to know what you're going to get out of it. That's the beauty of it. It really does tap into your intuition.
Yeah.
You know.
So do people, now people who create their own, how many would they do if they came to see you? Would they do like 2 or 3, or is that as intuitive as well?
That's intuitive as well. Some people work faster. Some people could just work on one. But in a therapeutic session, probably just one. But when I do a workshop, people have more time. And some people could just simply, like the entire workshop, like if it was 2.5 hours, they could work on one. Other people could come out with 5.
Yeah.
So it depends on the person.
I'm an A, it'd probably be like 20. And I hope you don't ask me what that means, but I think because you have so much in your heart and so much in your mind, when you start to put it out there, it could be a real lot. It could be a real lot. I do vision boards, which is similar, but not exactly like this, where people build boards around what they're attracted to and what they want to bring into their lives. And again, that's intuitive as well. You don't really know, you may think you do, those things that you're attracted to. So it's the aha moments as you're going through the pictures and wow, that's really neat and I really want to bring that into my life. But the soul collage is much more, is a little bit deeper, where you're going to ask the card, or you're going to ask, which is really simply yourself. But I mean, you're asking the card, but of course the answer's not coming from it. We want to make that clear. And yeah.
And that's actually the same way that I work with beliefs. Like I'll take a step back and ask, like if we're not doing expressive therapies, when I'm trying to get at a belief, like you said, with, if someone's sort of stuck in victim mentality, I'll ask it from another person. I'll say, imagine another person, and what would they be? What do they believe if they are a victim?
Yeah.
And so the other person, so my client can actually start to look at it from another person, and say it, and they start to, like, you can see them kind of like unraveling their own stuff, but they're able to get at it from that step back, which is so much safer.
Yeah, it is much safer when you put it on someone else. Even the fact that when people are beating themselves up mentally with something, I'll be like, well, what if your friend came to you and said all these things that you're saying? How would you respond to that? Wouldn't you want to help them feel as though there's nothing wrong with them?
Right.
You can feel things and you don't have to own everything you feel. You can just feel it and let it go. It's fine. So that's a very interesting way to look at things. And then also, a lot of the beliefs, when I do hypnosis with people, a lot of times people will have beliefs that if you ask them where it came from, it might have come when they were 5, My favorite one was don't talk to strangers. I talk to strangers all the time. Maybe when I was 5 it wasn't a great idea, but now what's the problem with that? So it's things that you hold on to as, that you may have taken in as children that don't serve you anymore.
Absolutely.
And you really need to step outside of that, understand where it came from, and then honor it, and then move forward. So I love the idea that you do this with the pictures. It's very safe. It would feel very safe to me if I were to come to you and start to work like that. Now, what other ways do you help people? I know you do meditation as well, right? Teach people meditation?
I do teach people meditation, and the form of meditation that I work with is Yoga Nidra, which it's all done lying down. And it actually incorporates a lot of the same stuff, where all emotions, thoughts, and beliefs are welcomed into the process. So as opposed to a lot of kinds of meditation where people think that they can't do it because they have to focus. This actually is very welcoming, so it's very expansive. You don't worry about if your thought goes somewhere, you're like, okay with it. Well, I need my thought. What is that thought? You know, why do I have that thought there? And it's welcome into my process, and it flows much easier into like a space of like pure, you know, being and awareness and your essence. So that's really my goal, is to help people find their, you know, their truth and a sense of authenticity, and then offer them compassion. And
Yeah, and we need that. We really do, because, you know, people have maybe one behavior and they feel as though that's them, that's, you know, like it's an awful behavior perhaps, and they just keep focusing on that, but it's just a fraction of who you are, and it can be let go as well.
Right.
But I mean, not to make everything something so overwhelming that you feel like you can't move.
Right.
So I would imagine that in that meditative state, you're allowing everything to kind of flow through you and not particularly single out a thought as bad or good.
Absolutely. Even sound and sensory stuff, we just, you welcome it in as if it's all part of the whole experience, and so that you're not looking at being distracted by sound. You're actually saying the sound is all a part of the experience.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So there's a lot of correlation. I definitely bring the practice, the yogic philosophy into my therapeutic practice. And it definitely overlaps, even if it looks very different. And the same with photography too. I don't see it as a jump, actually, at this point, because I will sometimes use my own photography in the cards. And some of the new things that I'm doing, which I absolutely love to do, are based now. I don't use a big giant camera and develop film. Like, I don't know, that might exist somewhere, but I don't know where anymore. Just like really professional photographers at this point. But I use my iPhone. I'm like, I just love having an iPhone.
Yeah, it's nice
and
to
I
have
do
that.
sort of an iPhoneography. There's sort of a thing. And just like really play with your camera and all the different apps that you can create different things. And I'm a firm believer, people like get sort of put down selfies. But when I was a photographer, I did 1 million self-portraits. And if you look at famous artists, they do a lot of self-portraits. And I think it's the modern self-portrait that everybody has access to.
Right.
And so it's fun to play with. People love doing that.
The other thing that's kind of interesting about that is some people love to have their photograph done, and other people like, you can't take a picture of me. I'm going to look awful. I'm this, I'm that. And again, that stems from beliefs. I can't tell you how nice it is to have you here. You're a fascinating woman. If anyone wants to come down and see Mitzi down at Living Buddha Nature Center in Millis, just give her a call. She'd be glad to see you. Again, she does take insurance as well, so that kind of makes it a little bit easier for people to go down and connect with her. And I want to thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you.
It's very special to have you.
Thank you so much.
You.